Around 5:38 p.m. on Thursday, March 6, 2014, OPA at Mount Olympus in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin was operating normally. As the yellow car rounded one of the ride's many sharp turns, witnesses heard shouting from the ride and saw a rider being ejected. The rider fell almost 17 feet onto the concrete ground and sustained multiple injuries, with some of them being severe. When the car returned to the station, the lap bar was still down in its secured position. OPA was shut down and the investigation into what caused the accident began immediately. OPA had operated for almost 8 years without any issues before the accident occurred. So why now did the ride have a serious accident? The answer would come from the maintenance routines and possibly even the operator training procedures that Mount Olympus used. OPA was a twister coaster that opened at Mount Olympus in 2006. The ride was manufactured by Zamperla and featured 6 cars that could each seat 4 riders across. These cars were unique in that they were designed to spin during a section of the layout. Despite the spinning feature being unique when compared to most other roller coasters, this type of ride has been replicated many different times and can be experienced at many different parks around the world. In fact, other manufacturers have even created similar roller coasters, such as Reverchon, which manufactured the defunct Primeval Whirl at Disney's Animal Kingdom. Even though these rides are very similar, there are some minor differences that can be found between some of these coasters. One of the most obvious differences is the ride's restraints. The restraints on Reverchon spinning coasters are lap bars that must be pulled down similar to an over-the-shoulder style restraint to be secured. In addition, some of the spinning coasters manufactured by Reverchon, such as Ragin' Cajun at Six Flags America, feature seatbelts that further secure the rider. The Zamperla restraints are different as they offer a basic T-bar style lap bar to safely secure riders during the ride. Many of the Zamperla versions do not feature seatbelts, including OPA. These lap bars use a ratcheting system to lock the lap bar in place during the ride. The system works by having 2 separate gears with locking teeth that lock against spring-loaded paws. It allows for the lap bar to be rotated downward but not raised upward when locked and working properly. Ratcheting systems are common on amusement rides and are used on many popular rides around the world safely. In October 2010, Zamperla released a service bulletin that featured modified maintenance procedures pertaining to the lap bars found on their twister coasters, after finding that the ratchets could potentially skip or even cause the lap bars to fail due to fatigue. This bulletin applied to all twister coasters manufactured after 2004. The bulletin was delivered to Mount Olympus and all other owners that operated a twister coaster that would need to adhere to the modified maintenance procedures. These modified procedures required a ratchet check to be completed in the daily inspection. This involved each lap bar being opened at its minimum locking position and then being pulled stiffly to ensure that it is locked. This process would need to be completed again in an intermediate and fully closed position to verify that the lap bar properly locks. If a problem was discovered when completing these checks, the ride was not to be opened and the ratchet system for that lap bar would need to be replaced. These checks were to be performed every day before the ride opened to the public. As OPA opened in 2006, it would be subject to these new procedures. Around 5:38 p.m. on Thursday, March 6, 2014, OPA was operating normally. 4 guests entered the queue line for OPA and went to board the attraction. When they approached the station, one of the guests asked the ride operator if all 4 of them could ride in one car. The operator said that they could and continued to load them into the yellow car. The operator checked all 4 lap bars and dispatched the car as normal. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first, but at some point near the end of the ride during the section where the car spins, the rider in seat number 1 was thrown from the car. The rider fell almost 17 feet onto the concrete floor. One witness reported that the rider struck 3 poles during the fall. A manager from Mount Olympus, who was standing right next to the ride, immediately initiated Mount Olympus's emergency action plan and responded to the scene. One of the bystanders called 911. By the time the police arrived, there were multiple people tending to the guest. The guest was transported to a nearby hospital emergency room, but later flown to a trauma center due to their injuries. The guest survived, but sustained lifelong injuries. The police began the investigation into what caused the accident and gathered witness statements from multiple Mount Olympus employees and guests. They found during the morning tests 3 of the cars were swapped out for the other 3 cars. Park maintenance also told the operator specifically not to operate the red car because it was having issues with the lap bars coming unlocked. One of the police officers responding to the accident took photos of the car for the investigation and pulled on the lap bars to see if he could find any issues. The 3 lap bars for seats 2, 3, and 4 all remained down in their locked position and appeared to be working properly. However, the lap bar for seat number 1, which was the same one that the rider was sitting in, came unlocked, and the officer noted that it appeared the locking mechanism was stripped. The officer double-checked the lap bars and got the same results, with seat number 1's lap bar coming unlocked when force was applied against it. After completing all of the on-site work needed for the investigation, the officers left the scene. Later that night, a woman reached out to the police department and claimed she had some information that could assist with the investigation. The woman stated that she witnessed the accident but wanted to remove her granddaughter from the scene to prevent any emotional damage before the police arrived. She also had some interesting comments regarding the operator's response to the situation and claimed that the operator tried to flee the scene, and the only reason the ride was stopped was because she tugged on the operator's sleeve and encouraged her to stop the ride. However, none of the other witnesses supported this claim. The most notable piece of information that this witness provided was that she rode OPA with her granddaughter in the yellow car roughly 5 minutes before the accident occurred. She remembered telling her granddaughter to hold on because the lap bars are loose. She also stated that she had to hold down her lap bar throughout the duration of the ride. She was seated in seat number 1, the same seat that the injured rider was sitting in. The Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services reported to the accident site on the day after the accident to complete their part of the investigation. They spoke with the owner, operator, and maintenance personnel at Mount Olympus and reviewed all of the paperwork that related to OPA. Mount Olympus advised them that non-destructive testing was completed, but the report was not provided during the investigation. When the state requested the operator training records, Mount Olympus said that they complete their training but do not document it. They also inspected the yellow car and noticed that seat 1's lap bar would not lock in place as it was intended to. They took a closer look at this lap bar and found that the locking teeth and paws were not locking properly, and that the components showed excessive wear. Eventually, Zamperla and the investigators from the previous day reported to the site to complete the most thorough inspection yet. They conducted a reenactment of the accident, which involved placing water dummies that weighed similar to the riders in the yellow car during the accident. As the car went through the layout, the water dummy in seat number 1 shifted forward and the lap bar opened as the car maneuvered through the turns. After another inspection involving Mount Olympus and Zamperla, it was determined that the locking mechanism for the car was worn out and defective, which resulted in it malfunctioning. However, Zamperla determined that the locking mechanism was installed and assembled correctly, and the malfunction occurred simply due to the components being worn out. In addition, all 12 of the lap bars between the 3 cars that were operating on the day of the accident were inspected. The inspection found that 11 out of the 24 paws skipped, and this caused 4 lap bars to completely fail. Zamperla released the bulletin that modified the maintenance procedures to require ratchet checks to find any problematic lap bars over 3 years prior to this accident. However, Mount Olympus claimed they were unaware of the bulletin and had not implemented the new safety checks that Zamperla required. Finally, it was found that the weight of the 4 riders exceeded the maximum capacity of 660 pounds that Zamperla put in place when the ride was built. The total combined weight of the 4 riders was 60 pounds over the limit, at roughly 720 pounds. This may be related to improper operator training, but as Mount Olympus failed to follow industry best practices by not documenting operator training by use of training checklists, there's no way to know what or how the operator working OPA that day was trained. Mount Olympus was cited with 4 code violations as a result of the investigation's findings. The first violation claimed that Mount Olympus failed to properly maintain, repair, and modify OPA, and cited the failure to include maintenance procedures included in the 2010 bulletin that could have prevented the accident. The second violation surrounded the worn and defective parts that Mount Olympus opened and operated OPA with on the day of the accident. The other 2 violations surrounded the operational and training procedures that Mount Olympus used leading up to the accident. The first of these 2 violations surrounded the weight of the guests on the ride exceeding the limit that Zamperla put into place. The final violation cited that Mount Olympus did not document the training of their operators. This could result in insufficient training, and Mount Olympus had no way of proving that the operators were properly trained to the guidelines of the manufacturer. Following these violations, Mount Olympus announced that OPA would be permanently closed and removed from the park. Mount Olympus fully complied with the Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services. Within a month following the investigation, Mount Olympus had fully corrected all of the issues cited in the violations on their remaining attractions. OPA would be sold to Wade Shows and still travels with them under the name Mighty Mouse. No notable accidents have occurred on the ride since, and tens of other Zamperla Twister coasters throw millions of riders each year without incident. Mount Olympus still operates many different rides and attractions, but unfortunately has not had the greatest record, as other accidents have occurred since OPA. Almost a year after the OPA accident, an accident occurred on their catapult ride, which was an elastic slingshot. That accident will be covered in a future video. And with that, that's all we have for this accident. Have you been to Mount Olympus? And if so, did you feel the rides were operated and maintained in a safe way? Let me and everyone else know watching in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.